looking outside was a way of escaping the knowing that was here. I don't care what happens, but I will not use my life force energy for anything but healing. I just wanted to know what would happen if there was no structure imposed on my life from the outside. The relief that comes when you know you're living in integrity with yourselves. That was my biggest feeling.
There we go. We're recording. Ishita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, guys.
It's been a long time coming. I know it's been like 3 or 4 different, through my fault, basically, more than anything, but rescheduling and changing around. So it's wonderful to finally get down and have this conversation today. And I want to start the podcast like I start every week. And that is, if you were at a little intimate dinner party sitting next to a complete stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
Wow. Depends on the stranger, honestly. It depends on who and where and what Ishita is showing up in the room. Um, but in essence, I might say something like I try to show up and do the needful and go from there. And that's not satisfying enough for a lot. But so maybe we might say, yeah, it's so funny you're asking me a question that really that I've sat with for a long time because there was a part of me that in the beginning of my journey felt like I had to have an answer to give it a shape and a form. And like if I could just speak it out just right and just so that I could somehow convey the essence of something that to me still feels really ineffable,
Yeah.
and that illusion's gone. I don't think I can. So sometimes I might be really tongue in cheek and say, what I do can't really be described. It has to be experienced. And if you're curious, we can dig into what that is. But yeah, I don't know. There's no more than that.
It's a challenge, yeah. And I always ask this because I love to, and literally every guest has the same problems answering it. Honestly, I think it's because the conversations we're having, and hence why I love podcasting because it allows us to, and anyone listening to really start to dig into and have a deeper, meaningful conversation around it, which gives us context and an understanding, or at least then, of what it is we do. Because I find bios and things like that quite boring. We read them and it's all official, and it's like, well, what does that really tell us? We could write anything down, so that's why I don't really read the bios out in the intros or anything like that. That's just me
Love
personally. My favorite answer is actually, I always jokingly say I do as little as possible when they ask me, and then
exactly
you
it.
know
As
and go,
little as possible and just what's needed. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm fascinated with your journey because I've got here. You grew up in the foothills of the Himalayas, the Indian Himalayas. Is that correct? And then you ended up in North Carolina.
Yeah, sure did.
So, what happened? What was it like growing up in the foothills of the Himalayas? Because I've been to the Himalayas in Nepal, which
Wow, really.
was one of the highlights of my traveling ever. I spent a month in there and it was incredible. And I was just fascinated. What's it like growing up there, and how did you end up in North Carolina? And there must be a bridge somewhere to why you do that today. There's a lot to
Yeah.
cover.
I've thought about this too. What is this Indian soul doing here? Um, See, growing up in India is one thing, and growing up in the Himalayas is a whole other thing. And if you've been there and you're energetically sensitive, you might know what I'm talking about. Because you can't escape the grandiosity. You cannot escape just this really I struggle to even find the words. Like there's a sacredness that's built in, there's an attention to that dimension of life in all of Indian culture. The whole land is permeated with it. And of course, it's distorted many ways. But when you're in the mountains are a repository. Now I understand what the hell was happening. And when I was a kid, it was just what life was. That's what I knew. But even then, I felt the energy. And as I said to a teacher, like 30 years later, I was like, I could feel this energy, but I didn't know what to do with it. And he said, yeah, but it knew what to do with you. And so there's this way that the landscapes that we live in, they live in us and they work us, right? And I can still feel like I live so far away from those mountains, but I know the movements that have been shaped by those mountains are still very much alive and throbbing in my heart.
Yeah. Wow. So why did you end up leaving? What prompted you to?
There was the question of how to study everything I possibly could at one time in university. And, you know, if for some reason my parents really wanted me to go abroad, and I did not really. I wasn't excited about it at first until I realized that, it would be nice to be in a situation that is completely foreign, and I would have to really find my own feet and way. And there's something curious about that to me. Plus, I wanted to study so many things, and like in India, you can't double major and double minor and all the things. And in the States, I could go and just dive into the whole thing anywhere I wanted. That was really attractive. So I showed up here when I was 18
Oh wow.
and I didn't know anybody. and and once I graduated, I decided to stay.
Okay.
And one thing led to another, and I've lived sort of in 5 different corners of this country. But we moved down to the mountains in North Carolina about 2 years ago in the pandemic, and now we live sort of in the Midland. And it's a really beautiful, also energetically potent landscape.
Yeah, makes sense. So
Hmm.
you studied to be an architect, is that right? Have I got
I
this correct?
did. I did.
Architecture. So where was the bridge then from architecture to do what you're doing now? Was
Mm.
was there your own, I guess, healing journey to be had, or pain, or
Mm.
metamorphosis?
All of the above, as you said to me in the beginning, right? Um, there's a way in which I always knew that my life's work would involve, without knowing it in words, spirituality, meditation, presencing, embodiment, but mostly like living an aligned life. Like that's the most important thing in my being, is being in my alignment as much as possible. Since I was a kid, there's just no question about it. But I couldn't understand that that could be a thing that you could do, or so to speak, right? Um, and at some point, as you know, right, your experience starts to open up, or mine certainly did. When the questions that I was asking of life, and I was studying lots of different disciplines, I was looking to physics for all the answers to my biggest questions. I didn't think religion could do it. I didn't think anyone else knew, but I thought science, maybe like science is going to help me understand who we are, who I am, what this is, why we're here. Because they seem to have answers, but the closer I looked, the farther I felt. And I turned away from the sciences and I said, okay, let's make beautiful buildings and let's build form that connects people to spirit and each other. And, let's do that. And even that was a beautiful thing. Like I loved my work. I knew I was doing something meaningful. And as I was asking these big questions, like I was doing many, many different disciplines. I was writing, I was doing photography, I was a journalist, I was a painter. Like all of the inquiry was full on in everywhere. You can't not. Even in architecture school, my thesis was the Center for Self Reflection, Otherness, and Narcissism. A building that is the lens to examine the self from. I mean, I was looking at the site of the Detroit riots, where Rosa Parks Avenue now lives. And I was asking the big questions through my discipline. I was asking the question of how does violence originate? Where does it come from? How does it happen that people are so otherized? Right? And that opened a whole inquiry into the nature of self. Wow, look at that. You can't escape it. Right? These were the questions that I'd been asking anyway, and they were coming and ripening until it was just clear that nothing outside of me was going to give me the answers. And looking outside was a way of escaping the knowing that was here. And when that happened, the drama was up and the unfolding began, and a series of openings in my own experience, like direct experiences of truth, love, God, whatever you want to call it, Kundalini awakening, blah, blah, blah. Use your choice of words. But the flood, the flood of openness was so big. And I was still working as an architect in those days. I was still moonlighting as a designer and whatnot. And there was something cooking in me, and my nervous system was finding an expansion I'd only sensed without ever knowing. And at some point, that was so clearly the movement forward that to deny it was not possible. It was just not possible. Like I remember saying to someone, someone my father-in-law said, "Well, when are you going to do your life's work?" I said, "Oh, when I'm old and I have gray hair and, like people will take me seriously." He said, "Why?" And my whole world fell apart. I said, "What do you mean, why? That's how it is." And he's like, "You're scared of coming out of your closet." I said, "Yeah." Obviously, I'm sitting in my spiritual closet, as I called it. Until and I'll share the story. This was the turning point. People had been coming to me under people have been showing up who were having dark nights of the soul, like unpleasant awakening experiences where the nervous system was out of sync. There was like ungroundedness. There was all kinds of issues showing up. And I don't even know how they were finding me, but like quietly friends or people would just show up and I would say, just hear whatever we did happen, cleared, move on, and don't tell anyone about it. Like don't tell anyone. Just go to the woods, be alone, be quiet, integrate it. And I was fine that way until I was going to work, and I was an architect in Boston, right? And we were designing this courthouse. We are designing a trial court where 8 judicial courts were going to come together in the same building. And I was very excited about this project because we're doing public service. And like, here we are at the center of the trauma field. Like, everyone in the building is traumatized. The judges, the people who are on trial, their families. Like, it's a stress field. And here, I'm so grateful. Like, I'm the one who gets to come in and I'm going to design this building and like give, like, the detention center that we used to draw at the basement. Every day I would say, it's so glad it's me. I'm going to give them as much dignity as I can by placing the toilet just so and the shade wall just so. And like, I was trying to infuse healing into the space. In every move we made, we were designing gardens and like all these ways for people to find ground and center in a really stressful situation. And then one day we were walking through the building. I was doing a walk with my team as a precedent. We were studying a different courthouse, and it was the day that BB King died. It was meaningful to me. I studied in Louisiana, right? And I love BB King. Right? So I remember that. That was when I got in the elevator, someone said, "Oh, BB King died today." And I'm like, "Oh my, what's happening?" Right? Get into the walk, and this was the courthouse where there was a footballer, I guess a soccer player, sorry, footballer, American footballer, Hernandez. He was on trial that day for murder in the building that we were walking through. And it was also the day that we in the United States, federal court, I can't remember exactly, but I think the verdict for, do you remember there was a Boston bombing? There was a marathon bombing in Boston. And the person who bombed was there were two brothers. The older one had died, I think, and the 19-year-old at that time, I think he was 19 at the time, he was 17 when this happened, was sentenced to 30 years of solitary confinement followed by the death penalty. And I was just like, just feeling the weight of this system. And I'd been studying reformative judicial systems versus what we have here in the States, which is privatized prison systems. And I was walking through this detention area which I'd been drawing, right, for this new building every day, just feeling the gravitas of this built form. And a young woman, like really young, she must not be in juvie, so, or I wouldn't have been able to see her, must have been like 19, comes to her cell, puts her hands on the glass, and just looked at me. I was probably like 15 feet away from her, and just her look made this whole thing real in a way that I couldn't have imagined. My whole energy field was pulsing. Like this is the face of a person who is suffering the consequences of a system that is so deeply punitive. And I could no longer, push away my responsibility for her suffering. Even though I had the best of intentions, whatnot, I went home, got in the car, drove my 2 hours, and cried the whole time. And I knew it was time to stop because where I put my energy, where I put my attention matters. And the most traumatized society is there in prison. And my tax dollars, my everyday energy is going into supporting a system that is completely run on monetary interest. Even, yeah, so even though I was not an American, I was an Indian citizen at the time. It's so easy to say, this is not my country, this is not my system, but it is. And I was just so clear, and I knew I was on the wrong side. I said, I don't care what I do, I cannot do this anymore. And that was the opening. That was the opening into the unknown to go say, okay, we're going to listen to exactly what wants to come through. I don't care if I don't make a dollar. I don't care what happens, but I will not use my life force energy for anything but healing.
Wow. What year was that?
Oh, goodness. I feel like that pivotal, that was probably 2015, 2014, something like that.
Okay. And when you got to that, you triggered about 5 questions as you spoke the whole time. And I don't want to go off on tangents and just keep the theme going for a minute. I'll loop back hopefully to some of the things that are going through my head. But one thing that fascinates me is that as human beings, we all have a desire to live out truth, like it's innate in us, isn't it? And we've become so disconnected from ourselves, from others, from nature, from we just become numb to that and lose that connection, I feel anyway. And but when we start to go on this inward journey and reconnect to that aspect of ourselves, then it starts literally screaming at us, you know, which is terrifying at the same time because it's beyond what or who we think we are or what we told ourselves our identity, whether it's an architect or, a fitness trainer at the time, or I was a plumber, like there's all these different aspects that we think we are, or business owner. But I guess the point is that when that moment happened and you said, I'm done, I mean, that to me is true courage, because I had to go through that initiation myself too. What happened then? Because if you come in like, that's it, I'm done, I'm 100% in, I'm no more. Were you terrified? Were you excited? What was that transition look like then into the world in which you've created for yourself from that moment on?
Thank you for asking. Often in these stories, that nuance gets left behind. what happened was I came home and I was crying and I was like bawling to my husband and telling him all the things that I was feeling, and um, just the deep release of a long held back pain, like real. I don't know how to say this. Maybe the closest thing is like real grief for the unowned responsibility until that moment. And like if you ask anybody, they'll be like, "You're the most responsible person I know," blah blah blah. But what I mean is like that the pain of that separation, the pain of that, like, oh, just a little bit of denial, just a little bit of like, oh, just far enough to where I don't have to directly reckon with the consequences of my action. That really hit home. And Eric, my husband, he held me and he said, "So when are you quitting? When are we quitting our jobs and leaving?" We'd been talking about both of us stopping work and just seeing what wanted to come through. Because there was a big part of me that just wanted silence. I wanted nothing. I wanted to do nothing. I wanted to be nothing. I just wanted to know what would happen if there was no structure imposed on my life from the outside. What does this one want to do? And we'd been talking about it, and that night it was just clear. It was like, okay, how many weeks of notice can I give the team in a responsible way? And there was trepidation, definitely. For There was trepidation, I guess, in that very like practical, elemental, logistical sense. Like, oh, now I have to do this like thing, like put my whole life on pause, and that has like steps to be followed. Unfortunately, you can't just be like, turn it off and off I go to India, right? But there was such a big relief. I think the overwhelming feeling in me was just relief of like, oh, I'm not going to be lying about how I want to engage. Like there's just felt like the sense of, the relief that comes when you know you're living in integrity with yourself. That was my biggest feeling, and the rest, it was chaos. But it was easy. It was easy to swim through it. Like all the stuff that happened, we went on this adventure. We both quit our jobs, which took us both courage. We were both really, invested in our work, and we rented our apartment. We went to India, and I broke my shoulder. Like what happens when you go and you finally have this time to do nothing and like do all the things, you like life happens, right? I break my shoulder. It's a serious injury. I had like all kinds of complications in different medical things. And like it was a rough gamut. We spent 6 months traveling through, feeling the land, like regrounding into a culture that I hadn't been in since I was 18, right? And then came back. And then there was the big question of like, now what? What do we do now that we're home? Right? Like, are we going to get jobs? Are we going to blah, blah, blah? And I had said, I'm not going to make any decisions. But being on the road showed so clearly what the calling was. Like, people would just show up, and my husband would point, and he said, "Why don't you just do this for a living?" I said, "What am I doing? What is this?" I said, "It's not a thing." He's like, "What do you think you're doing?" I said, "I'm just living my life." He said, "Well, then you can live your life and help other people and get paid for it." I said, "Really? You think so?" So that was kind of the foundations of how this thing started. Came back home, sat in our house, and again, I was like, I'm not gonna walk in and get a job for anyone. Like, there's nothing. It has to be honest and clear. And people started to come. And once I decided it was gonna happen, I took a week off, went and beat the shit out of the woods. I was like, I had to release years of pent up anger for not listening to this. That was when my father in law challenged me. He said, "When are you going to do your life's work?" I said, "When I'm old, when I'm 80." And then it freaked me out. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to go to the woods and make my peace with this because it's either now or never." And the movement was so clear. I went camping alone for a week. I cried. I sat on the earth. I like literally rolled around. I said, okay, I'm done resisting this. I'm here. Show me what to do and where to go, and I will. And I sat in my car in a rainstorm. There was a thunderstorm, and I like came up with the logo for Come to Center. It was the top part of the Om. It was clear. I said it's going to be called Come to Center, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to do what I can to share what I know. And that's all. I didn't know there was such a thing as transformational work. I didn't know there was coaching. I didn't know these were businesses. And I didn't care. I said, I know another way, and people don't seem to remember that other way. So here we are. We'll just remember the other way together, and it'll be good. And here we
I lo- what I love it. I'm getting goosebumps as you share. Honestly, it's because it's so. It's the true. It's our actions that are speaking, isn't it? Like you completely surrender to something far greater than ourselves to live from that place, and to go basically fuck it and see what happens. And when we're in that, it's so freeing, it's so empowering, and just liberating. And when it actually then the way starts to appear because we are taking the steps first, there's no greater feeling, because we know, like, in our core, that we're on purpose and we're doing something that's not only serving ourselves but serving others, and something that, I guess, it binds the whole universe together.
That's so true.
It's a,
That's, I guess, what you're naming is that feeling of alignment, right?
yes.
It's just very simple in that place. And not to be very clear, like I was scared shitless for so many
Mm.
things. I didn't want to, I mean, it brought to the surface everything that I'd ever run from. All my fears. It was the quick route to meeting everything I'd avoided in myself. I was afraid of taking money from people I didn't like. I didn't want to take money from people that I did like. I didn't want to receive money for spirituality. This was my Indian baggage, right? Like all of that. And then I was trying to start a business, right? And so there is that like beautiful, like sword, clean, sharp arrow of alignment. And then there's all this stuff that's dancing around it that you're like, you have to meet and greet and find and like really attend to in a way.
Wow. So I got there's two questions I want to ask you. And one, I want to loop back, because I think it's for some I'm getting pulled back to a question and then pick it up from this moment. But when you were speaking earlier, you talked about the spiritual closet that you kept yourself in for a while, which I love, which I completely relate to. And that you had these moments of true awakening. Was it a definitive moment, like in a moment in time that you can re- recall, or was it more of like a gradual kind of over months period?
Mm. Yeah, I seldom talk about it, and I'm sure you understand why.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's a great question. Probably both. Like the first time I can clearly remember um, having that experience of like just deep coherence was when I was in high school playing piano. And it was like the piano was playing me, and I was like, interesting, you know. And then there were punctuations. I don't know if this is true of everybody, and I suspect it is. A lot of people don't notice, but those experiences that we call awakening experiences, enlightenment experiences, they're happening. They're happening, but there's like a lack of metacognition sometimes. But
Mhm.
everyone has experienced a state of flow somewhere or the other. For me, the big opening began in the middle of a crisis when I was going through a rough time in my job as an architect. I was breaking up with a long time relation, but I was asking these questions. And I was just fine tuning in myself, and there was this moment of clarity, and you can call that the first opening, where I separated what I knew from what I understood. Understanding and knowing became two different things. And so that could be a surrender to the knowingness that always knew the oneness of life, cannot explain, cannot even try to explain. But the trying to explain was what was keeping me away from the knowing, right? And once that happened, like there was a gradual and steady opening. It was just a very clear because I wasn't trying to get anywhere. I hadn't imagined any of it could happen to me, or who knew. I was just really curious about life and myself. I was the clearest, shortest experiment to like check out from the inside. And it was a series of months. Like I just started sitting and meditating. I never intended to. I never learned how to. It just could not happen. It was like it had to happen. I had to do it. I just wanted it. So it was such a gift. And then over time, like I could feel, I now in retrospect makes sense. Like it was a gradual sort of like big open heartedness, like a big love becoming. And then there were moments that were very clear. Like there were moments over weeks, over months, where I was in different states of consciousness. You might say that's not exactly accurate, but I do remember one particular, the first one, where I was like, oh, I've been sort of out of my body in a way. And I was talking to my mother about this today. Oh, you know what? And she recognized the state I was in because in India you do. But yeah, like both hand, like together and pinpoints. And that just keeps opening up. I don't think there's any end to it, you know.
Hmm.
And I've even forgotten your first question. I don't remember what that was.
No, that was perfect. It was basically, was there any specific moments that happened to with your own personal openings and things along your journey, which you shared beautifully. Then why once you once you spend a week in the forest and
Mm.
like I said, did you say get angry in the woods for a week? I think that's what you
Yeah,
said.
I
Yeah.
had to get, this is something that I didn't know at the time. But we all have to choose to live. And we all have to at some point, and in my experience multiple times, choose and agree to live the life that we have come here to live. And in that moment, there was, eons of oppression, not just personal, but also cultural. As a woman, as this being, there was lots of repression in me where I had disowned the anger in myself for years. I I had been slowly and steadily inculcated to be really obedient. That's what Indian culture does. That's what all my education, my growing up, all of the things. And part of it was for me to claim my voice and say, no, I actually do have something to teach. I know this, and I'm going to now allow myself to know this. And so scary, let other people know this too, because when you have a business, you have to tell other people about it. But if you don't want to talk about yourself, well, that's a problem, right?
Mhm.
And so there was this big charge that had to be released and cleansed just to claim. It's the life force claiming its fire, saying, no, I'm going to be here. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to show up in this way. That's my commitment to myself, because it's about nothing else. It's just about me. The good that happens is good, and it is the intention, but it's not the focus. It's for me. This is my way of living in integrity with myself. It's purely for me. That way, nobody owes me anything. It's my pure joy to show up and do what happens and is needed and as best as it can. But That was the claiming, that was the anger, that was the saying, no, I declare that I'm going to put both feet into the fire. And I've had to do that at least twice since. It's not a one and done deal, unfortunately.
No, it's not, is it? So, so why do not why
Mm,
yeah why do people come to see you? Like, what are you finding after being now helping others? Um, where people are at, what is going on, and um, what their biggest concerns are? Do you think?
beautiful. I mean, Guy, you named it yourself. You know this, right? And I feel really privileged at this point in my journey that those who come to find me are just so deeply aligned in that they're not looking for a quick fix to things. They're not looking, you know, to have that. I mean, everybody wants to have the enlightenment experience and whatnot, but there is a wisdom path, right? And the work that I think we both do is an invitation onto the path, knowing that the path is endless and it has its own wisdom. So, those who come, there are people who are in existential pain. There are people who are in existential curiosity, kind of like me. We tend to bring along the folks who mirror our sort of echo our own nervous system's evolution. So I work with a lot of people who have found the sort of typical ideas of success. Those have been met. There's like,
Hmm.
the many degrees from the prestigious institution, the good job, the like lots of money, the like success and fame, and still something missing. There are folks who come because they're excited to know themselves. There are folks who come because there is something resonant in the field, right? Like there's a listening and an honoring of that movement that says, "Oh, there's something here," and I sometimes we don't even know what that is, but there's just something that wants to be learned through the connection of being together, of sharing presence together. That's the most fun, right? But often folks come because there is that beautiful way that life gives us, exactly what we need to heal in a tight bundle. And there's difficulty, which appears to be a problem, right? And then there's that way of softening and integrating it as a gift on the path. But those are just some things, but a lot of it is relational, right? There's a way of losing relation with ourselves and each other and all of life when we forget who we are at core and how, yeah, the ramifications of that are infinite, as you know.
Hmm. Absolutely. And how do you how do you live yourself then these days? Now being having a business and stepping into the fire, and I'm always curious as well because our business here in Australia, it's a business too. We run retreats and workshops and online programs and things, and far out. Like I get decision fatigue sometimes, and there's pressures and there's things, and I have a 2-year-old daughter, and sometimes I lose my flow or lose myself in just being human. You
Mhm.
know. Um, so I'm curious to know what each day looks like for you in that sense.
Hmm,
And yeah.
I forget, and then I remember that happened. Um, yeah, I'm lucky in that I have very little responsibility in the sense that I don't have pets, I don't have children. I have a partner, my husband, and I. Our relationship is my biggest teacher, is my wisdom path, as you may have discovered. Right? Come to center the business and the most intimate relationships. Like it's all over, right? But there are moments of turmoil. Like yesterday, we were having work done on our house, the roofing went so that instead of getting the roof on top, we had rain basically pouring into 6 rooms in our house. Right? So now there's a flood. These are everyday things that happen. And now I get to just sort of, there's no separation between the path and life. There never was. Never was. But now it's just so obvious that like everything that has ever happened, that ever happens, is an opportunity for me to live into, you know, those places, to really show up as presence, as love, as truth, and learn what needs to be gleaned. So there's no illusion. Like I'm so flawed and so human, and there's even less, I guess, efforting to be anything that I'm not. No perfect human here. Um, yeah, but I don't know. Does that even answer your question? Like, what does it?
Yeah, yeah, it is, yeah, because I mean, God, our company's even called Live in Flow, and I have this romantic idea that I'm just constantly living in flow, but it's not quite like that. But there are definitely moments, and I strive for those moments, you
Mm,
know, that
yeah.
that, that reconnect back.
And I imagine you might notice that you find your way back to the flow quicker and quicker as you go. And that seems to be the only measure I can find of on the path. It's like, yeah, the roof was leaking in 16 places yesterday, and I was angry. I was like, are you kidding? Like, this is what we are doing to prevent this from happening. But doing this roof is making this happen. What the heck is going? Right. And then I got to like really use all the learnings and like put them into play. And today we had a team meeting with the roofer and like the contractor who's coming to now like redo all the drywall and take out our walls and ceilings, not just the roof. And my husband and I, and we were all laughing. And he was so scared. He was like, you don't have to pay me money for the roof. And I was like, correct. Like we're in this together. You're a team. We're a team. Like this isn't nobody's fault. Like we get to like walk those lessons, and you can feel how much joy there is in transacting in that way, right?
Mm.
Like that's the gift. Like I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have been so generous and happy and just like at ease with this ridiculous situation, but it just gets easier and like the whole thing looks like okay, like it's the emotions gonna come, the feelings gonna go, and we're gonna work this out. We're in this together. Like I'm a piece of life, this is a piece of life, and that's the gift of it for me.
Mm. And then you get to jump on a podcast under your leaking roof after everything went upside down at the end of the day.
In the generous neighbor's house. Yeah, so it goes. That's a day in the life of.
Yeah. I got a few questions for you before we wrap it up. And one is, I'm curious, do you have a morning routine? Do you have any particular practices? Because I know that it varies with different people I speak to.
Yeah, I'm not a creature of routine at all. And that said, every day it just it has to happen. I find space to be quiet and alone,
Mm.
and I usually need lots of time alone. Right, it's in nature, ideally. And these days, I don't have a regimented morning routine at all. But I have space in the morning. My idea of luxury is time in the morning, just to just feel what wants to happen and follow that. So I sit at my altar some days. I meditate some days. I meditate every day, but sometimes when I'm sitting. Um, yeah, but there's a lot of finding my feet on the ground. That's really important. Listening to the birds, feeling the trees, there are deer in our yard, like those kinds of things. It's very, very routine, very mundane. It's not, yeah, and at some point there is body stretching and
Mm.
something or the other, what shows up. Sometimes I remember to brush my teeth. But that happens every day. And there's always something. Energetic basics, actually, that's something that I teach. And that's, it's not even a morning routine, it's a life routine. Like there's constantly, my attention is always sort of clearing my space, grounding, and yeah, those are just habits of attention that walk
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I always remember somebody saying to me many years ago, the true act of meditation is what you do with your eyes open during the day, not so much what you do when you sit down in your comfy little meditation bubble, like when life's happening to at you all at once, you
Yeah,
know.
so true.
Yeah. Have there been any books? I know people listening are always hungry for books and different
Mhm.
things. Has there been a particular book that's stuck with you, or you would recommend to other people that's been a big part of your life?
Absolutely. So it's funny, right? Like the books that that really helped me recognize myself. There were two. The big questions started to come towards me when I was reading the autobiography of a yogi, Swami Paramahansa Yoganand, and he was talking about himself and his journey, and he was traveling through places that I lived in, and he was speaking the language of my culture and that understanding of what's possible. And it was just resonating so deeply. But at that point, I hadn't quite surrendered my scientific, like deconstructive mind. Right? So it caused this upheaval in my system. I said, how can I believe and know the goodness of this truth when I don't believe it, when I don't understand it? That was the split between understanding and knowing. And he just writes so honestly and from the heart. Like, I just love that narrative. And I recommend that not for any reason other than to just really be in the field with a master. Just be in the field and know that these words are coming from a deep truth that maybe some of us haven't imagined yet, but is possible, right? And then I would say I am that. I am that Nisargadatta's famous book at this point where I was walking by a store and there it said, I am that. And I looked at it and I said, I am that and that I am. And what do you know? And I opened the book and the first page and I was like, yep, who is this guy? He gets it. Right. And then I probably read like, I don't know, 20% of that book. And it was served me well at the time. Man, and I would recommend that to somebody who is just curious about themselves. But there is a danger in that one. There's a dangerous way that a lot of people I encounter who have, used these teachings and met that book and taken it really to heart, sort of leave their bodies in a weird way, especially in the West. And a lot of my experience is working with Western mind, lived between MIT and Harvard and served that population for a long time. It's all the neck is their lower body, as we joke. And, I was part of that crew myself for a while. So the last book that I leave folks with, and this is part of, when we, and in a lot of the courses that I facilitate and a lot of the work that I do, I'm, I make people read this book. It's called The Five Personality Patterns by Stephen Kessler. And what it is this beautiful, and I think it's a service to humanity that he's done because I went out and when I had my awakening experiences and when that sort of wholeness of life revealed itself, I realized how much of the time I'm leaving my body. Like how much of the time I'm not actually attuned to the felt sense in my body, especially in the times that I'm overwhelmed. And that was really interesting to me because I said, well, how can I know it be at one with all of life, but except my body? Like, what's happening there, right? And that led me down a series of inquiries that led me to core energetics, which is a healing modality. And it comes from Freud's work, from Reich, William Reich, and Alexander Lowen and John Parakis. And what it is an understanding of how energy shapes physical, emotional, and mental form, and how to work with each of those patterns. So there's a long body of work about bioenergetics and core energetics and spirituality and all of these things. But what Stephen's done is he's sort of condensed it into a really accessible format. And it's just the easiest way to sort of understand how the energetics are shaping you. And the stress is on energetics because that seems to be core in my experience. Like once you understand and align your energy, everything else falls into place.
Mm.
And it's
Wow.
just a really interesting book for me still.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I'm going to get it. I've not read it. It
Yeah.
sounds fantastic. Yeah, yeah. So with you have at the center, what are your offerings? What the works that you offer for people? Do you do online? Do you do one on one? Do you do coaching?
Mhm.
Do you do?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So since the pandemic, the work is completely online because I don't want to get anyone infected. But it's been great. It's been great to innovate because of this limitation. I used to be part of a crew that ran like 2 year long retreats. I used to do a lot of in person work. But these days, there's three basic things that I'm offering. And the first of them is what we were just talking about is energetic basics. Foundations. These are the foundations, like these are the things that those people who were coming to me and had their foundations sort of rocked by having too much energy come through their bodies too soon, like too much kundalini yoga or like too much inner work or trauma healing. Even a lot of trauma healing modalities unfortunately can be very traumatizing if one is not established in a base of presence. And I was very lucky on my journey, very lucky, but a lot of people aren't. And so it is my hope and wish and offering to help people sort of anchor into those basics, the foundations of presence before they engage in deeper work. A lot, oftentimes, a lot of students have already been doing the work. Most of the people who come to me have done years of therapy, years of spiritual work, practice, and there's still something sort of not connecting, not sort of, you know,
Mm,
in place. And even there, we would start with basics. So I teach energetic basics. I was teaching them as 2-day workshops. And it's the thing that sort of helps us get into our bodies, ground into here now, knowing our individuation as well as our connection to the everything. So that's one of my beautiful like heart things that I love sharing. And then there is a 6 month journey, which is also something I really love doing. It's a 6 month journey in community. And in it, we look at how we come together, how we're being within ourselves and with each other. So it's a group that's about harnessing group intelligence and the magic of not a personal awakening, but awakening as a group, healing as a
mm,
group. What does that look like when it's lived at larger scales? Like that's one of the most interesting things to me. So it's called murmurations because that's the intelligence we're sort of starting to move as a group. And in it we do walk basics into embodiment, slowly, softly, over time, looking at spiritual, emotional, and energetic and somatic um, intelligence. Yeah, yeah, those are the two things that I'm really excited about right now, because a new cohort of murmurations is starting actually next month. So September 21st, I'm going to set the energetics for it, and October 6th we begin. um, and then I do one-on-one work, and I also work with organizations who are really interested in aligning their energetics with how they're operating, and look at systemic issues using tools like constellations or you know
mm.
whatever needs to be looked at in the dynamics between and within people.
Yeah.
I go where I'm
Beautiful.
called.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you just say your website out loud? The link will be in the show notes as well for everyone, but just
Thanks.
so they can hear it if they're driving.
Sure thing. It's Come to Center. COMETOCENTER. It's a call to presence for me and for all of us.
Amazing. One last question for you.
Mhm.
With everything you've covered today, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners to ponder on?
Man, that was a lot about me. So I guess I would leave you to ponder the places in you that are hungry for that kind of movement, perhaps that long to be in deeper alignment in your life. And the invitation is to examine those places with loving curiosity. Yeah, for fun.
Hmm. The joy of it all. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Ishita. I really appreciate um, everything you do. And this conversation was just beautiful. And it's been lovely getting to know you on the show. So just want to know a heartfelt thank you from here in Australia.
Oh, thank you so much, Guy.